I never thought peace could sound this quiet. My name is Helen Porter, and at 69 I'd finally learned to enjoy silence. The hum of cicadas outside my porch in Raleigh, North Carolina, the ticking of the grandfather clock my late husband rebuilt by hand, the slow rhythm of mornings with coffee and an old paperback. For the first time in years, I wasn't a nurse, a wife, or anyone's caretaker, just a woman living softly inside the house she and her husband paid off together. The insurance policy we'd bought decades ago was supposed to keep me safe when he passed. I believed it still did. That afternoon, the quiet broke. A storm had rolled through earlier, and my power blinked twice before returning. Out of habit, I opened my home security app to check the cameras, making sure the basement hadn't flooded. Instead of water, I saw movement in the living room feed. My son Eric and his wife Laura were sitting at my dining table, papers spread across the polished surface. I almost smiled, until I heard my own name spoken in a whisper that didn't sound like love. Laura's voice was low but sharp. Albert Hunt said once she signs the updated power of attorney, we can submit the claim. $600,000, Eric. We'll finally have the down payment for the new house. My finger froze on the phone. Eric leaned closer to her, his tone uneasy but greedy. We just need Mom to look confused when the company calls. If she hesitates, I'll tell them she's been forgetting things again. My heartbeat drowned the rain outside. They weren't joking. I could hear the printer spitting pages, see Eric flipping through the stack. The logo of the insurance company was clearly visible at the top of the form. I sat motionless in my recliner, the phone glowing in my trembling hands. Every breath I took felt borrowed. I watched as my own child rehearsed how to steal from me, how to declare me incompetent, maybe even dead, to collect a payout that was meant for my security, not as luxury. When they left an hour later, I replayed the footage again and again. The words "file the claim" looped like a curse. The nurse in me wanted to believe in misunderstanding. The mother in me knew better. I shut off the feed, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark until the house stopped shaking with thunder. I whispered to myself, "Don't let them see you panic." The quiet returned, heavier this time. Somewhere in that silence I made a promise, not to confront them, not yet, but to learn exactly how far their lie went before I decided what kind of mother I needed to be. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my kitchen window as if nothing had changed. The coffee tasted the same, the neighborhood still quiet, and yet everything inside me felt altered. My heart didn't trust peace anymore. I moved through the house slowly, taking in details I'd never noticed before, the half-open drawers, the faint scratches near my desk lock, and the missing set of spare keys that used to hang beside the fridge. Eric and Laura came downstairs later than usual. They were laughing, real, easy laughter that felt like mockery now. Laura kissed my cheek, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "Morning, Mom. You sleep okay?" I forced a smile. Like a rock, I lied, watching her eyes dart briefly toward the hallway where my office door stood closed. They left a few minutes later, claiming they had errands in town. I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway before locking the front door and walking straight to my desk. My file drawers were a battlefield, papers stacked wrong, folders out of order, one of my sealed envelopes ripped open and taped back poorly. Inside, I found my insurance policy copy missing. My pulse raced. I checked the security footage from the previous night again. The recording from the living room was intact, but the camera pointed toward the hallway had gone black for almost 20 minutes. Either a technical glitch or someone had unplugged it. They thought I wouldn't notice. But I'd spent 40 years as a nurse in a busy trauma ward. I'd learned to see patterns in chaos. And right now, I could see their pattern. Manipulation, preparation, deception. At noon I drove to the local pharmacy under the excuse of refilling a prescription. Instead, I bought a new flash drive and asked the young clerk if he knew how to save video files from a security app. He showed me in less than a minute. I backed up every clip of their conversation and tucked the drive into the lining of my purse. Later that evening, Eric came home alone. His eyes looked tired, but not from work. "Laura's meeting someone from the insurance office," he said casually, opening the fridge. "We're trying to help you get better coverage, Mom." "Better coverage?" I repeated softly.
Yeah.
Something that ensures you're taken care of if, he paused, feigning hesitation. If you ever can't handle things yourself. I nodded slowly, pretending to be touched. That's thoughtful of you, sweetheart. When he went upstairs, I sat at the table, staring at my reflection in the black glass of the microwave. My face looked older than it had yesterday, lines deeper, eyes duller. But behind them there was something new. A quiet, simmering rage. That night, while they slept, I tiptoed into the living room and hid a small voice recorder inside a flower vase near the sofa. Then another one behind the bookshelf, near the dining table. I didn't know exactly what I would catch, but I knew it would tell the truth better than my trembling words ever could. The next afternoon, I heard them whispering again. From my bedroom, I could make out Laura's voice, calm but commanding. Albert said the paperwork will look real if we file through his contact in Charlotte. The company just needs proof she's not mentally sound. Eric sighed. And if she asks questions? Then we remind her how forgetful she's been. Confusion works in our favor. Every word struck like a nail into my chest. They weren't guessing about my health, they were building a lie. By evening, my recorder was full. I transferred the audio files to my hidden flash drive and placed it inside an old jar of buttons in the sewing cabinet. It was strange, but for the first time in days, I felt calm. I finally had proof, not just of greed, but of betrayal deep enough to kill love. Before going to bed, I wrote one sentence in my old nursing journal. They think I'm weak because I'm old, but I've survived worse than their lies. The war hadn't started yet, but I was already preparing for it. By the third day, grief had begun to change its shape. It no longer came as tears, but as a steady pulse beneath my ribs, like the ticking of the clock that never stopped in this house. I'd always believed my strength came from patience, from letting storms pass without shouting at the thunder. But that morning, staring at the faces of my son and daughter-in-law across the breakfast table, I realized patience had turned into silence, and silence was exactly what they needed to win. Laura scrolled through her phone as she sipped her coffee, pretending she didn't notice me watching. Eric sat beside her, eyes on his laptop, the blue light reflecting against his face. "Mom," he said casually, "do you remember where you put the life insurance documents? I think we need to check if your policy covers home health care. It's just paperwork, nothing serious." The same question came every few days now, always wrapped in fake concern. I stirred my oatmeal slowly, keeping my voice even. "I'll look for them later." "Maybe we can help," Laura offered, her tone dripping with sweetness. "No need," I said. "I remember exactly where they are." Her smile faltered for a moment. She didn't realize I could see straight through it. When they left for the day, I walked to my late husband's study. His photo sat above the old cedar desk, his face forever frozen at 57, kind eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. "You'd know what to do," I whispered. "You always did." I sat there for hours, replaying memories of Eric as a boy. The scraped knees, the graduation day, the way he used to call me my hero. Somewhere between those memories and the voice recordings, that little boy had disappeared. In his place stood a man I didn't recognize, a man who could forge his mother's signature and call it survival. Grief broke fully then. My hands shook as I pressed them against my face. But after a while, the shaking stopped. The air felt different. There was a strange steadiness settling in me, the same focus I used to have during medical emergencies in the hospital, when panic couldn't save anyone, but composure could. That evening I drove to the clinic to see Dr. Olivia Bennett, my family physician for more than 20 years. She looked surprised to see me without an appointment. "Helen, is everything all right?" "I need your help," I said simply. "I think someone's trying to make me look unwell. Mentally." Dr. Bennett's brows furrowed. "Who would do that?" "My son," I whispered. She took my hand gently and listened as I told her everything, about the recordings, the insurance documents, the forged forms. Not once did she interrupt. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, eyes sharp with concern. "You did the right thing coming to me. I'll schedule a full cognitive evaluation tomorrow morning. We'll document everything officially. Your memory, reasoning, awareness. No one will be able to claim otherwise. The next day, she ran every test she could: memory recall, verbal fluency, problem-solving exercises. I passed all of them. When she handed me the signed report, her voice was steady. "You're as sharp as ever, Helen. This paper is your shield. Keep it safe." I folded the document carefully and slipped it into the hidden pocket of my purse beside the flash drive. For the first time in days, I felt like I had armor. On my way home, I stopped by the courthouse and asked for the contact of a lawyer specializing in elder financial abuse. The clerk wrote down a name on a yellow sticky note: Rebecca Moore. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the sun fade behind the pine trees, I thought about the next step. The time for grieving was over. The woman I had been, the soft-spoken, trusting mother, was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who could play the same game, but smarter. I whispered into the fading light, "You wanted to treat me like a victim, Eric. Let's see how you handle the nurse who raised you." The next morning began with a faint smell of rain and a quiet resolve that felt almost foreign. I woke up earlier than usual, dressed neatly, and drove straight to downtown Raleigh to meet the attorney Dr. Bennett had recommended, Rebecca Moore. The law office sat inside a red brick building with ivy creeping up the walls, the kind of place that looked trustworthy before a single word was spoken. Rebecca greeted me with a warm, steady handshake. She was in her early 40s, calm-eyed and direct, the sort of person who radiated quiet control. "Dr. Bennett told me a little about your situation, Mrs. Porter," she said, leading me into her office. "Why don't you start from the beginning?" I told her everything. The recordings, the missing documents, the forged forms, even the plan to declare me mentally unfit. Rebecca didn't flinch once. She simply took notes in quick, precise handwriting. When I finished, she leaned back and nodded slowly. "This isn't just financial manipulation," she said. "It's a criminal conspiracy. Forgery, insurance fraud, and elder financial abuse. You've already done the hardest part, collecting proof without alerting them." Her confidence steadied me. What should I do next? Rebecca folded her hands. "For now, you act as if nothing has changed. Continue your normal routine. I'll prepare a contingency petition for the court. If they try to use any forged document, we can file it immediately and stop the transfer. Meanwhile, we'll install hidden recording devices, professional ones, to capture any further conversations. Once we have their verbal confirmation, we'll bring in law enforcement." She handed me her card and a second one with a name written on it: Detective Mark Johnson. He's worked several elder abuse cases with me. When the time comes, he'll be the one to make the arrest. When I left her office, the world outside looked different. Not softer, but clearer. The lines between fear and power had shifted. That evening, I returned home carrying 2 grocery bags to keep up appearances. Laura was in the kitchen, typing furiously on her laptop. Eric stood near the window, pretending to scroll through job listings. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked without looking at me. "Productive," I said. "I saw Dr. Bennett for my checkup." He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a smile. "Everything okay?" "Perfectly fine. She said I'm in excellent health." I met his eyes, letting the words linger just long enough for him to wonder how much I knew. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat at the dining table and organized my evidence. Each recording, each note, each document went into a labeled folder, not just for Rebecca, but for myself. I wanted to remember every step of this betrayal, every sign I'd ignored before. 2 days later, Rebecca visited my home with a small black suitcase. "We'll hide one camera in the flower vase near the television," she explained. "Another near the kitchen cabinet, one under the lamp by the sofa, and a miniature microphone in your blouse. No one will ever notice." Watching her move with quiet precision, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies, people who believed me, people who saw me as something more than a confused old woman. Before leaving, Rebecca looked me straight in the eye. "The next time they bring papers for you to sign, call me immediately. But act normal until then. If they think you're suspicious, they'll change tactics." That night, I practiced my role, the gentle, forgetful mother they thought they controlled. But inside, my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. I was preparing for war. I whispered into the stillness of the living room. "You're not stealing $600,000 from me, Eric. You're stealing my peace. And I'm taking it back." By the end of the week, the tension in the Porter house felt like invisible smoke, thick, hanging, impossible to clear. I kept my voice soft and my smile constant, but inside, every nerve was wound tight as wire. Eric and Laura had shifted into full performance mode, playing the roles of caring children for neighbors and friends, while quietly plotting my erasure behind closed doors. It began on a Friday morning when Laura appeared in the doorway with a folder in her hands and a sugary tone that made my stomach turn. "Helen, sweetie, we need you to sign a few updates for the insurance. Nothing major, just technical things." Albert said it's all standard procedure. I looked up from the crossword I was pretending to focus on. "Albert," I repeated, feigning confusion. "Yes," she said smoothly. "Our lawyer friend. He's helping us handle your policy paperwork, so everything's organized. You know how complicated these companies can be." "I see," I murmured, folding the newspaper neatly. "That's thoughtful of you." Eric joined her, placing his hand on my shoulder. "It's just to make sure you're covered, if anything happens, Mom. You don't have to read all that boring legal talk. Albert's taken care of everything." Their eyes gleamed the way predators' eyes glint right before the leap. I smiled, small and polite. How nice of him. They sat across from me at the dining table, papers spread neatly, pens aligned. I watched the entire scene through the lens of Rebecca's hidden camera inside the lamp. Laura pointed to the first page. "You just need to sign here and here. It's about updating the beneficiary and ensuring we can manage your finances if, God forbid, you ever get sick." I traced my finger across the page, pretending to read. I already knew what it said. The first paragraph transferred full power of attorney to them. The next reassigned the $600,000 life insurance claim in their names. And the final section labeled me as mentally compromised, pending medical confirmation. I blinked slowly. It's a lot of text. Maybe I should go over it after lunch. Laura's smile tightened. "It's better to sign now, Helen. Albert has a meeting later." "Albert must be very busy," I said softly. "It's kind of him to help us. What law firm did you say he's with?" She hesitated a split second too long. Hunt Legal Associates in Charlotte." "That's strange," I replied, tilting my head. I checked online. There's no listing for that firm. Eric's jaw stiffened. "Mom, you've been on the computer again? You know how that confuses you." I met his gaze, gentle but unblinking. "Of course, dear. Sometimes I forget things. But not everything." Laura reached forward, pushing the papers closer. "Just sign here, Helen. It'll take 2 seconds." My hands trembled deliberately as I picked up the pen. I said, "I was thinking maybe Dr. Bennett should look over these first. She said something about not rushing legal paperwork." The silence cracked like glass. Eric's voice hardened. "Dr. Bennett doesn't need to be involved. This is a family matter." I set the pen down and smiled faintly. "Family matter. I'll remember that." They exchanged nervous glances, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. "She's stalling again," Laura muttered. "Albert said we have to finish this before the policy renews." "She'll sign," Eric replied, his tone sharp. "She always does." They didn't realize the microphone in the vase beside them caught every word. That night, while they slept, I transferred the day's footage to the secure cloud folder Rebecca had created for me. The files were labeled automatically with time and date stamps. The truth was building itself, one betrayal at a time. The next morning, I called Rebecca from my bedroom, keeping my voice low. "They tried again," I said. "I think they're growing desperate." Rebecca's tone was calm and deliberate. "Good. Desperation makes people careless. The next time they pressure you, stay calm. Act cooperative, but don't sign. We're almost ready." When I ended the call, I looked around the room that had been my refuge for decades. Every corner now carried an echo of deception. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was waiting. 2 days later, a car pulled into the driveway. Albert Hunt himself. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with slicked-back hair and a smirk that smelled of confidence and fraud. Laura ushered him inside, as if welcoming a savior. "Mrs. Porter," he said, flashing a professional smile. "I'm just here to finalize some small formalities. You've got yourself a fine son and daughter-in-law. They only want what's best for you." I offered him tea, my voice pleasant. "You must have an interesting job, Mr. Hunt, helping families manage things like life insurance." He chuckled, sitting down. "I do what I can." I caught a flicker of unease in his eyes when I placed my phone on the table, face down. He didn't know it was recording audio. Laura leaned toward me. "Helen, please. Just a few signatures, and we can stop bothering you." I smiled faintly. "You're not bothering me, dear. You're teaching me patience." They didn't understand I was already documenting the final piece of their trap, their greed, their deceit, their calm attempt to rob me blind in my own living room. When they finally left that afternoon, my house fell quiet again. I exhaled slowly, clutching the teacup in both hands. The trap was set. All I needed now was one more conversation, one clear confession, and their $600,000 lie would collapse in front of them. The following day carried the kind of heavy stillness that feels like the air knows something terrible is about to happen. I woke up before dawn, dressed carefully, and adjusted the small microphone Rebecca had sewn into the lining of my blouse. When I looked in the mirror, the reflection staring back didn't look frail or frightened. It looked calm, deliberate, and quietly dangerous. By early afternoon, I was ready. I brewed coffee, set cookies on the table, and waited for the show to begin. Sure enough, Eric's car rolled up the driveway at 2 o'clock sharp. Laura stepped out first, carrying the same folder she'd brought before, and right behind her was Albert Hunt, smug as ever. They walked in like salespeople, rehearsed smiles already in place. "Mom," Eric said warmly, "we thought we'd go over everything together today so you feel comfortable signing." "Of course," I said, my voice gentle but steady. "I was hoping you'd explain a few things. You know how easily I get confused." Laura smiled, tight, victorious. "That's exactly why we're here, Helen." They sat across from me again, arranging the papers carefully. The microphones in the lamp, the vase, and my blouse captured every sound, the rustle of documents, the scrape of chairs, the low conspiratorial tones. Albert adjusted his tie. "Mrs. Porter, these are just routine authorizations, allowing Eric and Laura to assist with your insurance and finances in the future." I tilted my head. "So, you'll have access to my policy?" "Temporarily," Albert said smoothly. "It's simply for protection." "Protection," I repeated. "From whom?" Laura sighed dramatically. "Helen, we're just trying to make sure no one takes advantage of you. You've been so forgetful lately. You almost paid the utility bill twice last month." I leaned forward slightly, smiling kindly. "And if I refuse to sign?" Eric's eyes flickered. "Then you'd make things harder. For yourself." The room went still. I looked at him for a long moment. "Harder how, dear?" He hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "Albert can't process the paperwork without your authorization, and the insurance company might freeze your account. It's just easier if you sign." I nodded, feigning thought. "So, you're saying that if I sign, the insurance pays out to you?" Albert's face changed slightly, one tiny twitch near the mouth. "No, not directly. It would just transfer management rights to them." I leaned back, folding my hands calmly. "And if I die?" The silence that followed was as sharp as glass. Laura forced a little laugh. "Helen, that's morbid. No one's talking about that." "Oh, I think you are," I said softly. "You've been talking about it for weeks. I heard you." Eric blinked, confused. "What?" I looked straight at him. "Every word you said in this room. Every lie about my memory. Every plan to file for $600,000. Every time you called me confused." Laura froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Eric's voice cracked. "What are you talking about?" I'm talking about the security cameras you forgot existed, I said, my tone still calm. The ones you thought were broken. Albert's confident smirk faltered. You've been recording us? No, I said, reaching into my pocket. You've been recording yourselves. I placed the small recorder on the table, its red light blinking steadily. And you just added the final piece. The door opened behind them before they could react. Detective Mark Johnson stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and Rebecca, Moore holding a legal file. Good afternoon, he said, his voice professional and cool. Eric Porter, Laura Porter, and Albert Hunt, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, document forgery, and elder financial abuse. Eric shot to his feet. What? This is insane. She's manipulating you. She's paranoid. Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos, clear and precise. We have full audio and video evidence of your plan to falsify medical documents and transfer Mrs. Porter's insurance benefits illegally. You've each confessed in your own words. Laura turned to me, her face pale. You can't do this. We're family. Exactly, I said quietly. And that's what makes it unforgivable. Albert tried to stand, but one of the officers was already behind him. Handcuffs clicked shut. Eric's voice cracked again. Mom, please think about what you're doing. I have, I said. For weeks. He looked at me one last time, but there was nothing left between us now, no warmth, no history, just the cold emptiness that follows betrayal. As they were led out of the house, I exhaled deeply. For the first time in months, my breath didn't shake. Rebecca turned to me with a small smile. You did perfectly, Mrs. Porter. Every word they said was captured, and it's all admissible. I looked around the living room. The same walls that had witnessed laughter, birthdays, and now justice. I didn't want to win this way, I said softly. But they left me no choice. Rebecca nodded. Sometimes, truth is the only weapon left. I stood there as the police cars drove away, red and blue lights reflecting through my window, painting the room in colors of ending. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was relief, quiet, tired relief. The next few weeks unfolded like a long, waking dream, half relief, half disbelief. I had spent years being the quiet one in the family, the woman who avoided confrontation, who believed that love alone could correct betrayal. But now my world had become a courtroom, my words turning into evidence, my memories into testimonies. Rebecca handled everything with the precision of a surgeon. Every audio file, every recording from the hidden cameras, and every statement from Dr. Bennett was logged and time-stamped. Detective Johnson compiled a full report that laid out the entire conspiracy like a map, forged signatures, falsified medical records, and an attempted fraudulent claim worth $600,000. When the first hearing came, I sat quietly in the back row while Eric, Laura, and Albert entered in handcuffs. The sight of my son in a gray jumpsuit made my chest ache, but the ache wasn't for him anymore. It was for the years I had wasted believing he'd never become this person. Albert tried to act calm, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Laura looked around nervously, searching for sympathy that no one would give. Eric, though, avoided my eyes completely. He looked smaller somehow, his arrogance stripped away. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. This case, State of North Carolina versus Eric Porter, Laura Porter, and Albert Hunt, concerns charges of elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted forgery of legal documents. Rebecca stood and began her presentation. Her tone was steady, her words deliberate, the kind that left no room for doubt. Your Honor, she said, what we have here is not a misunderstanding. It is a calculated, deliberate attempt to rob a 70-year-old woman of her home, her money, and her dignity. These recordings, she pressed play, speak for themselves. The courtroom filled with their voices. Eric's impatient tone. Laura's cold instructions. Albert's calm coaching. Every word was crystal clear. I watched as Eric's shoulders slumped and Laura's face drained of color. Dr. Bennett took the stand next. Mrs. Porter is in full possession of her mental faculties, she said firmly. She has no cognitive impairment. I personally examined her and verified her memory, reasoning, and comprehension. The defendants attempted to falsify documents claiming otherwise. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "Thank you, doctor." When it was my turn to speak, my knees trembled slightly as I walked to the witness stand. Rebecca gave me a reassuring nod. I took a deep breath and began, my voice low but steady. "I raised my son alone after my husband died. I worked double shifts, paid his tuition, and when he and his wife needed a place to stay, I gave them my home. I never imagined the people I loved most would try to destroy me for money. I don't hate them, Your Honor. I just want peace." The courtroom was silent for a moment. Even the air felt still. When the verdict came, it was swift and decisive. The judge's gavel struck like thunder. The court finds all defendants guilty on all counts. Albert Hunt was sentenced to 5 years for forgery and conspiracy, along with permanent disbarment. Laura received 2 years for aiding and abetting fraud. Eric's sentence was the harshest, 3 years in state custody and full restitution of legal expenses. As the bailiff led them away, Eric turned toward me for the first time. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I looked at him quietly. "You started it, Eric. You just didn't think I'd finish it." He lowered his eyes and said nothing more. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled of rain again, clean, new, forgiving. Rebecca walked beside me. "You did it," she said softly. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "Without you and Dr. Bennett, they would have buried me under their lies." She smiled. "You'd be surprised how few people your age fight back this hard." I paused, looking up at the gray clouds. Maybe more should. Maybe they just need someone to remind them that getting older doesn't mean giving up. When I returned home that evening, I sat on the porch, wrapped in my old blue shawl. The porch light flickered on, catching the empty rocking chair across from me, the one Eric used to sit in when he was little. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that. Justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance, like finally standing on even ground after years of tilting toward everyone else's comfort. 3 months passed before the house finally began to feel like mine again. The scent of fresh paint replaced the tension that had soaked into the walls. I'd fixed the loose hinge on the front door myself, pruned the hydrangeas that had been left wild in the garden, and given away the furniture Eric and Laura had bought. Every trace of them erased piece by piece. What remained was quiet, sunlight, and freedom. Some mornings I still woke expecting to hear their footsteps on the stairs. It wasn't fear anymore, just memory. Habit takes time to unlearn, especially when it's built from love. I would pour my coffee, sit by the kitchen window, and tell myself softly, "You survived your own family." Rebecca and Dr. Bennett still checked in regularly. Rebecca had become a friend more than a lawyer now. She stopped by once a week, always with her hair pulled back and her notepad in hand, even when she wasn't working. "How's your piece holding up?" she asked one afternoon, smiling as she looked around my living room. "Better than ever," I said, handing her a cup of tea. "Though I'm still not used to quiet that doesn't hide danger behind it." She nodded thoughtfully. That kind of quiet takes time to trust again. I told her I'd decided to join the North Carolina Senior Support Network, a local volunteer group for older adults who'd faced financial or emotional abuse. I'd give talks at community centers, sharing my story not as tragedy but as a warning, a guide to fighting back with truth and patience. Rebecca encouraged the idea. "You'll give them courage," she said. The first time I stood in front of a small crowd of seniors at a local library, I felt nervous, the same flutter I'd had the day I testified in court. I held my notes, took a deep breath, and began. "I used to believe getting old meant losing control," I said. "That we should let our children take over, because they know best. But that's not love. Love isn't control. It's protection, and that includes protecting yourself when those you love forget how to treat you right." Some of them nodded. Others wiped away quiet tears. When I finished, an older man approached me and said, "You make me feel less foolish for trusting the wrong people." That night, I drove home under the soft North Carolina moonlight, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I realized something profound. Survival had given me a new kind of purpose. Not to live in bitterness, but to teach others how to stay whole when betrayal breaks their trust. Months later, I received a letter from the state parole office. Eric and Laura had completed rehabilitation programs for family abuse and financial accountability. They would serve 18 months instead of the full sentence. Attached was a court order confirming they had relinquished all rights to my property and were legally forbidden from contacting me. I read it slowly, folded it, and placed it in the back of my filing cabinet. Then I closed the drawer and whispered, "That chapter's over." I walked to the porch, the air warm with spring, and sat down in my rocking chair. The same chair I'd once shared with my son when he was small. I rocked gently, feeling the boards creak beneath my feet, the rhythm calm and steady. Across the yard, the wind caught the chimes hanging by the window. They sang softly, not mournful, but peaceful. I smiled to myself and thought of my husband. "We did all right, didn't we?" I whispered. Even after all of this. The sun dipped low, painting the yard in gold. I realized then that I hadn't just won a legal battle. I'd reclaimed my life. My home was once again filled with honesty, laughter from neighbors who visited, and quiet nights where no one whispered lies in the next room. In my final entry to the journal I'd kept through it all, I wrote, "Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of safety. And sometimes, to protect your peace, you must be willing to lose those you once called family." As I closed the book, I felt the calm settle fully for the first time. I wasn't the same woman who'd watched her son steal through her documents in fear. I was someone new, stronger, wiser, free. And as the stars began to glow above the quiet streets of North Carolina, I whispered one last time into the night. The truth will always be worth more than any lie, even a $600,000 one. If you enjoyed my story and felt connected to Helen's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new life story like this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share what part touched you most in the comments below. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me keep bringing you more true-to-life stories filled with emotion, courage, and hope.